What if the band that gave you classic hits was also full of fights, betrayals, and fights on stage? The Eagles' famous story is about more than just music. It's about broken friendships, lawsuits, and public fights that shocked even their biggest fans. Find out the secret story that turned bandmates into terrible enemies and shook their reputation for good, the band's unstoppable rise. In the early days of the Eagles, they had the perfect mix of drive, timing, and skill. Both Don Henley and Glenn Frey were talented singers who were getting better known. They decided to start their band in 1971. After leaving Linda Ronstadt's band, they set out to form a group that could break new ground by combining rock and country into something completely new. From the start, they were clear about what they wanted to do: make songs that would last forever and have a big effect on the music business. Randy Meisner and Bernie Leadon just joined the team not long ago. Together, the four players came up with a new and interesting mix. Their unique harmonies and style, which mixed the raw power of rock and roll with twangy country songs, won them friends right away. Their first record had the now classic hit Take It Easy, which was a great reflection of the carefree, funky mood of the early 1970s. The Eagles' fame began to rise when people were hungry for their music. The next song, Desperado, helped them become even better known. That was the band's most famous song. It had scary words and a tune that never went out of style. But it wasn't just the music. It was also how they brought out the best in each other. Leadon's ability to play a lot of different instruments, Meisner's steady bass lines, Henley's powerful singing, and Frey's skill as a songwriter all came together to make a sound that was simple but very unique. They had a lot of fans, and people loved them. The Eagles went from being just another rock band to being the rock band everyone wanted to see. Before 1974, the Eagles had already made a name for themselves. Still, when they got Don Felder, their sound went to a whole new level. Felder's amazing guitar skills gave the band a new viewpoint and made it easier for them to break new ground with their music. His slide guitar skills and complex solos made the Eagles sound even more special. With Felder on board, the group had everything it needed to become famous. Even so, success came with some problems. As their popularity grew, so did the tasks that came with their job. The band members were tired from all the traveling, performing, and looking for hits all the time. Not only did their relationships get more complicated, but so did the dynamic that made their music so attractive. Different people had different ideas about the band's future, and those ideas didn't always match up. As disagreements about artistic direction and workload increased, small tensions started to form. The band kept making great music, but there was a quiet buildup of stress. Early years of quick success set the stage for one of the most famous fights within the band in rock music history. The band became well known very quickly, and millions of people related to their songs. But they were starting to show flaws below the surface. Being at the top, having personalities that don't get along, and artistic differences all pointed to the storm that was still to come. The Eagles' hidden struggles come to light. As Glenn Frey and Don Henley took over more and more of the band's musical direction, the Eagles' problems began to show. Early on, each member was important, but as the Eagles became more well-known, Frey and Henley became the most important. They were the major artists and decision-makers for the band, and they set the Eagles' musical direction and overall image. Their direction helped shape the band's sound a lot, but it also caused problems between the other members. It was hard for Don Felder, who joined the band in 1974, and Randy Meisner to feel like their efforts were not being recognized because of Frey and Henley's big roles. Felder was a great musician, and the Eagles' sound was shaped by his difficult solos and slide guitar. Still, he wanted to be an artist in more ways than just playing an instrument. He wanted to have more say over how the songs were written and how the band sounded. They saw something different from this. The two lead singers of the Eagles were reluctant to give up too much artistic control and were very protective of the band's sound. When Felder asked for more songwriting credit and royalties, the group resisted, which made the gap between them grow. Over time, these disagreements about making decisions and being creative turned into a constant source of stress. Randy Meisner, who was known for his smooth bass lines and great singing, began to feel more and more alone. By producing hits like Take It to the Limit, Meisner played a big role in the Eagles' early success, but as Frey and Henley became more popular, he had a harder time getting his voice heard. The band's internal fighting got worse because of his anger, making it even harder for the whole group to stay in sync. The lack of creativity made Meisner feel alone and unhappy, and it made the friends' once strong bonds even weaker. As these undercurrents grew in the background, they started to show up in the band's live shows. Some of the most famous things that happened were when Frey and Felder got into a fight at a show. After years of fighting, the two friends let out their anger on stage, which clearly split fans. These angry outbursts showed what problems were really going on in the group. Arguments on stage started to happen more often, which showed that the Eagles' personal problems were starting to affect how people saw them in public as well. These fights on stage showed the band's personal problems and a lack of trust. Frey and Henley used to count on each other to make songs that millions of people would like, but now they were fighting with each other. Felder's attempts to impose his artistic impact were seen as a threat, and Meisner's growing discontent only made the gap bigger. As everyone fought to say what they thought, the group's once solid foundation began to fall apart. On closer inspection of these early splits, it is clear that things were getting worse within the Eagles. Their intelligence, drive, and ambition, the very things that made them famous, were now making things worse. Felder wanted a bigger role, Meisner was let down, and Frey and Henley's way of leading made for a risky mix that meant there would be even more conflict. Before, the band was one unit, but now each member was pulling in their own way, and the group was trying to stay together. In the beginning, these disagreements led to the fighting that would make the Eagles' past so rough. The Eagles' moment of truth. When Hotel California first came out, it was a big turning point for the Eagles. This record not only proved that they were one of the most famous bands of the 1970s, but it also made them fight with each other so much that they almost broke. The success of the title song was helped by Don Felder's playing on the guitar. For the Eagles, the tricky riffs, well-known solos, and creepy tunes were turning points in their career. Behind the scenes, though, things were not as harmonious as the music made them sound. The album's success showed the group's flaws, even as it got good reviews and fame around the world. Felder definitely made a difference, but his desire for more artistic power and recognition caused problems. Glenn Frey and Don Henley were known for being very strict about where the band went. As Felder tried to gain more power, disagreements about who wrote the songs and who made the decisions got worse. These disagreements were not small ones. They were long-lasting fights that got worse as the stakes rose. The song Victim of Love was one of the main points of contention. It was originally planned for Felder to sing lead, but Henley had to cover instead. It was done without Felder's agreement that the recorded performance of him was erased. Not only did this behavior bother him, but it also made him less close to the band's leaders. What could have been a small change in another group that showed how the gap was getting bigger? Frey and Henley thought that their choice was necessary to keep the band's quality and uniformity, but Felder thought it was rude. The result was a gap that got bigger and harder to close. The worst of these problems happened behind the scenes at a political benefit in 1980. Personal and artistic disagreements between Frey and Felder that had been building up for years turned into a full-on fight. The band was still playing when it became clear that they had a problem. The event became famous as a fight that happened on stage and made both friends clearly angry. Fans and people who work in the business got a shocking look at the chaos that was going on below the surface. This public split was a turning point because it showed that the Eagles' internal fights were so bad that they could no longer be fixed. The band could not keep going the way it was because Frey and Felder were always fighting over power and with each other. They were at the top of the music scene because of their friendship and shared goal, but those things were almost broken. The Eagles broke up not long after this exciting fight. Both fans and the business were shocked when they first broke up. It looked like this band had done everything. many platinum records, stadium shows that sold out, and a legacy of classic songs. Still, the same success that made them famous around the world also brought out and emphasized their differences. People in the music business didn't understand how a group that seemed unbeatable at one point could fall apart so completely. Fans were very sad. There was a hole in the music scene when the band wasn't around. Their songs were still played a lot on the radio, but the human stories behind them made their legacy more complex. Hotel California was still an important event in history, but it also showed how personal conflict and artistic genius can coexist. The Eagles' career reached its peak with this record, but it also marked the end of the original band. Fans thought for a long time that the Eagles split was one of the most well-known in the history of music. The 1980 political fundraiser and what happened after it taught us about the demands of fame, artistic control, and how hard it is to keep a popular band going over time. The links that seemed impossible to break were cut off for good while their music played. The Eagles' story was shaped by this time period as much by the stress and eventual breakup as by the great music they made together. It was a fresh start. The Eagles' complicated reunion. Fans were waiting for this since the Eagles announced they would get back together from the 1990s. After the band broke up in 1980, many people thought they would never work together again. The Eagles, on the other hand, took center stage when Hell Freezes Over stopped being a joke. The tour that followed was a great success, which proved that they are one of the best rock bands of all time. Their music still brought together a lot of people, even after they released new songs and played their old hits again. Even though the meeting was exciting, old tensions stayed close to the surface. The original fights that broke up the band never really went away. On stage, the group looked like a solid unit, but off-stage, things were not always easy. Because of past fights, they still had problems and didn't trust each other. Because of these underlying problems, it was hard to keep the peace that fans wanted. Don Felder was quickly fired from the group in 2001, which was one of the most important turning points. It was a big surprise when he was fired, and it led to a court battle that lasted for years. Felder sued Henley and Frey, saying they fired him without cause and split the band's money unfairly. He said that they had broken an agreement they had made earlier to split the money evenly. In response, Henley and Frey filed their own counterclaims, saying that Felder had broken deals by writing a book that revealed private affairs. Lawyers' fees and countersuits made the band's internal fights clear. People who had been there for the meeting were now facing a very different situation. They saw a band that was still split up because of personal and financial problems, not a group of friends getting back together in peace. As details of their legal fights got out, the Eagles' attempt to show unity fell apart even more. Felder's book, which gave fans a look at the band's past from behind the scenes, made the gap bigger. Everyone involved felt cheated, and the public's response made people even more sure that the Eagles' relationships could never be fixed. A deal was finally made, but the details were kept secret. This quiet has only made fans think more. People asked about the terms that were agreed upon and how true the claims made by both sides were. The band's legacy became more complicated as the story of their story added the emotional and business problems that came with their new music. The court cases and public protests added another chapter to the Eagles' past that showed that even big successes can come with big problems. The legacy of the Eagles' feuds. The Eagles' songs show how they feel by how heavy they are emotionally. The group's creative disagreements gave it a unique sound and turned their songs from simple radio hits into musical records of a band in turmoil. When you think about how hard it was for them to grow up, songs like Life in the Fast Lane and The Long Run show more levels. The song Life in the Fast Lane shows both the band's rise to fame and the busy life that came with it. At the same time, The Long Run shows how the members' bonds are weakening and hints at how hard it is to keep success going. These songs are great examples of how the band can turn personal problems into powerful, lasting music. The conflict spread to the lyrics and shows, and it wasn't just disagreements over art. It was the Eagles' sharp harmonies and intricate rhythms that gave their music a unique intensity. When people learned about the tough relationships that went on behind the scenes, songs like Hotel California became more moving. The classic guitar riffs, sad melodies, and deep words often come from the band's own life. Their music hit home on a deeper level because it became almost personal. Even though their differences may have caused them pain, they also added to the depth and authenticity of songs that have been popular for decades. The story of the Eagles has become one of the most extensively studied in the history of rock music since then. At first, it was a story about a band's meteoric rise to fame, but it quickly turned into a serious lesson about what it takes to be successful. Celebrity life is hard, endless travel is hard, and keeping relationships alive in public is hard. Their path shows these things. The band's inner struggles have been shown in many interviews, documentaries, and books. People have been able to understand the complicated ideas behind songs through books like Heaven and Hell by Don Felder and movies like History of the Eagles. These stories show how disagreements about money, artistic control, and personal ties led to problems that were never fully solved. Because of these stories, the Eagles' fights became an important part of their history. In addition to the music, their story shows how one of the most popular bands in the world dealt with personal problems while still making great music. The fights and problems they may have caused didn't hurt their jobs. Instead, they became part of their legend. People were enthralled by their songs, but they were also interested in the drama going on off stage. Even though the Eagles are great musicians, their complicated past made them more approachable because it told fans that everyone has problems with other people. Even though there has been a lot of change, the Eagles' songs are still popular because they are about more than just their own problems. A lot of people still listen to their music years after they broke up. Songs like Hotel California are still played on lists of the greatest albums of all time, and they get new fans from all walks of life. Its work speaks to generations that didn't see the first run because it shows that great music can be enjoyed by everyone, no matter what the production issues are. Even when stories about their fights come up, the power of their art stays pure. When new people find the Eagles' music, they are immediately drawn in by the general themes, honest lyrics, and masterful musicianship that made their sound unique. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more behind-the-scenes stories and exciting insights. See you in the next one.